Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So we're back out here working on the pole barn project, and today we're going to talk about roof rafters on this addition. But before we get started with that, I wanted to give you an update on other progress on the project since the last video. And basically the last 2 weeks or so we've had a lot of rain, and as I mentioned earlier, to knit the new roof into the old roof I had to take all the metal panels off of the old roof. And I didn't quite want to get into that when we were getting so much rain, just because it's convenient to have storage under here for tools and equipment and lumber, and there's a lot of work that can get done under the sheltered roof. And so instead of going straight to the roof part of this project, I kind of backtracked and really worked on projects that could be done in between rain underneath the roof. That includes putting up all of the wall girts on this gable wall and also on that eave wall back there. I also framed out the roof openings for the garage doors. There's going to be a 9x9 over here on the main part of the pole barn, and then a 9x7 over here. And so really to work all that out, a lot of this really came down to fitting a 9x7 door in here, knowing where my floor level was going to be, knowing where my rafters had to be to get the required headroom to put in a door. You can do low headroom kits, but I really wanted to try and get a standard 9x7 door in here. And so really there are a lot of factors that go into how you frame out your garage door opening so that everything fits in the end, and you have to plan to know where your floor is going to be. And even though concrete or gravel floor, that's a ways off, you know, I had to set that floor level now to work out the door and everything else. And so that is all done. I've also put up a ledge or ledger board up here to support the roof rafters for this new addition. And you don't have to do this when you're putting on an addition, but it's a good way to hang or support your new rafters without depending on brackets or too much hardware. And so what these ledge boards are going to do is give me a place to, when I pull these new rafters up, get them in position, let them rest on that, not have to worry about them sliding or moving out of place. And long term, that is going to provide the support for those new roof loads transmitted down to the posts. Okay, so it's not going to rely on the header beams of the existing structure. These ledgers are basically new header beams just for this new roof and its loads. And so that's in place, and this brings us to the point now where I can finally start putting up rafters on the addition. So what I've just done now is laid out my test rafter, cut it, fit it into place, verified that it works. That's a super important step because I got to go ahead and cut another 12 of these, and you don't want to make a mistake and find out until you've cut all your rafters. And so you really want to do your first rafter, do a test fit, make sure everything works out well, and then go ahead and cut the others. So that's the point we're at now. So what I'm going to do here in a second is we'll take this test rafter back down. That is now going to be the template for the other rafters. We'll start tracing those out and cutting them. So stick around, we'll get started. Alright, so I have my template laid on top of one of the new rafters. When you're doing this, you want to look at the new board. If it has a crown, you want to always put that up. That way over time gravity is going to press down and probably straighten out that crown. You wouldn't want the board the opposite way, because over time gravity is going to make it worse. It's going to sag. So first of all, look down the length of the board. If it's crowning, you want the crown up. If there are any major defects or knots in the rafter, you want to try and put those on the upper side of the rafter, because that's the side of the rafter that's going to be in compression under load. And a knot usually will do okay under compression. If you had that on the bottom of the rafter though, that side of the rafter is in tension, that'll pull the knot apart, and that could cause weakening or failure of the board. So crown up, knots up, and you know, really just look over the length of the rafter. In this case I've got 16-foot boards. My rafter is, I don't know, 14 foot, almost 15 foot. You know, you might decide which end you want to cut off, the end that's worse. But these are all the things you want to look into before you lay your template down on that new board. once you're happy with everything, then you basically will just come and trace the upper cut over here, and I'm going to go down to the other end. And here I'm just tracing out the bird's mouth and the tail. And that's it for the tracing, and from here we can take the template off and begin our cuts. Alright, so there's our cuts. We did the uphill cut first, and then came down and did the tail and the bird's mouth, and now it's just a matter of repeating this, I don't know, 11 more times. Alright, well, it's 2 days later. I got rained out towards the end of the last clip. I did finish getting all the rafters cut, and came out last night after work and started putting them up again just to make sure everything was fitting right. So what I want to do now is switch the camera around. We'll go talk about how I'm attaching these rafters both to the header beam on the eave wall and then to the main structure up here. Alright, so we're over here at the eave wall, and we'll have two types of rafter to header connections at the eave wall. Most of them are going to be where the rafter falls in the middle of the header beam, and to attach that I just put some blocks on the header. These are nailed in with 5 framing nails. These are not going to go anywhere. I've talked about how to mount rafters to header beams in a previous video that I'll link somewhere up on the screen, and blocking is a real good strong way to do that. And so for each of these connections we've got the block, and then the rafter comes alongside of it, and I put 3 structural screws into that block. When you do this, you really don't need any metal hurricane straps. You can always add them for extra strength, but the block gives you a nice, strong, rigid connection between that rafter and the header beam. And then the other type of connection is going to be over here where rafters fall alongside of a post. And this isn't a coincidence. You really do have to plan this into your post spacing ahead of time. If you do typical framing with things on 2-foot centers, and you had rafters and posts on 2-foot centers, you're not going to be able to put a rafter to one side of a post. And so if you want to do this, and I strongly encourage it, it's very, very beneficial for structural strength. You're going to need to shift your posts over so the rafter can go to the side. And that all needs to be planned well ahead of time before you drill your post holes, before you lay out your wall girts and things like that. And so there will be 4 connections like this, 1 on each end and then 2 in the middle where the rafter comes up alongside of the post. And for that I just put in some structural lag screws again. I'm actually going to add a couple more. I ran out, but this is a place where you want a lot of fasteners spread out to have a nice strong connection to that post. Okay, then up here on the main structure where we attach the rafter, you can see what I'm doing here. As I talked about earlier, I got these ledger boards that were installed just below the original header beam on the main structure. And these were positioned to put these rafters at the correct height for the roof pitch, the slope, the roof height that I wanted for the addition. And the ledge serves an important function. You know, if you can help it, you don't want the rafter hanging off of a bracket only. You really want it resting down on something, and so it has a nice resting spot there on the ledge. I'll actually come back when all the rafters are up and put a second, well, I guess that'd be third ledge board up underneath and you know, butt it up tight against the underside of the rafters, just to provide some additional bearing surface for the grain of this wood to sit on the grain of that wood. You kind of do need to think about grain strength when you're supporting wood on top of wood, and I like to add a little bit more surface area when I can. So there will be another ledger board going on afterwards, but basically these rafters come up, they come up along the side of the old rafters, which I've cut short, and you can see here, I come up along the side. That's another thing you're going to have to plan ahead of time when you're laying out rafters and poles. It's much easier if you can come up along the side of original rafters when you're adding onto a structure. And so basically I lift these up into place, rest them on the ledge, put 1 screw into the old rafter just to hold it in place temporarily, and then attach these structural brackets on each side of the rafter. They are mainly there for lateral loads to keep the rafter attached to the main structure. You can come back with threaded rod and an additional brace if you're really worried about that, and that's something you want to do for decks and porches, not so much for roofs. But that's really the main attachment. I've used this many times over the years. It works very, very well. These Simpson brackets are very, very capable in terms of load. I'm using Simpson screws. You can also use the short Simpson nails to hold the brackets on. The smart thing about those brackets is they're asymmetric, so when you flip the bracket to go on the other side of the rafter, it's going to stagger the screw holes, so you're not really overloading the end of that rafter with all kinds of screws, which would weaken the connection. And so this is a real nice way to do it. You get the vertical load support from the ledger, you get the lateral load support from the bracket, and it's pretty simple. And you can see that rafter tucked up underneath one of the roof purlins from the original roof. I got that, I planned that to have about a 1/4 inch of slop, just so I wouldn't be trying to squeeze them in there tight, and everything nestled in there real nice, and I got a real nice fit up here. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about as far as the detailed connections. Now I'm going to set up the camera again, and we'll just go through and put up a few rafters. All right, so all the rafters are up, and it's kind of funny, you know, it took me weeks to get to this point. I had a couple delays due to weather and other things. But once I was able to devote some time to this, just in a couple hours after work, I've been able to knock pretty much all of these out. It was really averaging about 10 minutes per rafter. The end rafters took a little bit more work just because it was hard to rig those to get them up in place. But really, once I got moving, it went pretty quick. And so it's kind of neat. You know, you can see over here on the eave wall where the gable rafter meets the eave wall. You can really see all the details that come together at this point. You can see where it's bearing down on the header. We call that the bird's mouth. Normally it would be a little notch, but because I cut these tails narrow to match the 2x6 tails on the existing pole barn, there's not quite a little notch here, but you do see the detail of the bearing surface, the bird's mouth, and the narrow tail come together here. And then up where the rafter meets the main structure, you can see it up against the header beam of the original structure. You can see it resting on the ledge up there. And so it's kind of cool to see all these details come together and really see how framing, you know, everything works together to, in the end, to support your roof loads, get them down to the header, and then on down to the posts. So I think that's going to wrap things up for today. The next video, probably the next step, will be me putting on the roof purlins, and then I'm going to be putting on fascia boards on this eave over here, and then tying to the fascia on the gable of the main structure and carry that in. And I probably will make some sort of video on one or two of those things, some combination, because that's interesting work. But that'll be next time. So as always, thanks for watching.